everyone, and welcome to the Propcast. My name is Louisa Dickens, co-founder of LMR Re and board director of the UKPA, and I shall be your weekly host. Each week for 30 minutes, we'll be connecting the VCs, prop tech startups, and real estate professionals globally, and assist in bridging that famous communication gap we all love talking about. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Propcast. Today, we'll be discussing racial diversity within the real estate technology space. And today, we're joined by Adam Stanley, Global CIO of Cushman & Wakefield. So welcome to the show, Adam.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
Now, let me give everyone who's listening today an introduction to Adam's bio. And so Adam provides strategic and operational direction for Cushman & Wakefield's client-facing and colleague technology systems and infrastructure across all business lines and markets. As Global CIO and Chief Digital Officer and a member of the Global Managing Board, he advocates for the best solutions for the best clients, supported by the best talent. Now, in addition to driving the advancement of technology across the firm, Adam is equally focused on the advancement of people, establishing an inclusive and company culture and creating talent development opportunities. He is an executive sponsor for Unity, the firm's LGBTQ plus employee resource group, in addition to being an active member of BUILD, the Blacks United in Leadership and Development. And he's an advisor for the Black Equity Task Force. And he also serves on the board for Cushman & Wakefield's Charitable Foundation. Everyone who's listening, I'm sure you recognize the Cushman & Wakefield business. You know, it's a leading global real estate service firm with over 53,000 employees, 400 offices in 60 countries worldwide. It's massive. But going into a little bit more about Adam's 20 plus years industry experience. Adam is a change agent with a proven success driving growth, performance, talent retention, and innovation. Under Adam's leadership, Cushman & Wakefield was named to the CIO 100 for 2018, 2016, 2015 by CIO magazine. And he's also been named by Huffington Post as most social CIOs, which I'd love to hear how you get that sort of that title later, Adam. But prior to joining Cushman & Wakefield, Adam served as Technology and Security Services Director for Aviva PLC. Adam's numerous global and US leadership roles have included serving as the Global Chief Technology Officer of Aon, and Adam's also spent nearly 10 years in the famous Deloitte Consulting Group. Adam has served on the board of directors of GATX Corporation since 2019 and is active in the prop tech startup community. He serves as a mentor and advisor to multiple accelerators while serving on the board of directors of CEC 1871, which is one of America's top incubators. Now, Adam, how you have enough hours a day to cram this in, and I do not know, but nonetheless, appreciate you joining us on the Propcast. So, welcome again, and I would love to, start the conversation. And today we're talking about the importance of creating a diverse industry, which is notoriously difficult when you have two industries famously undiverse combined, and these industries, obviously real estate and technology. So maybe we can sort of kickstart with, telling the audience a bit about your sort of journey before coming, the global CIO and Chief Digital Officer of one of the world's largest real estate organizations.
Yeah, it's really funny when you think through the through diversity. It's for better or for worse. My entire career, I've been often the only in the room. The only Black male, the only gay male, whatever that group is. It's always been kind of the only, and so you almost get kind of dulled to it after a while, and that's a risk, because you can't take it for granted, because if you take it for granted, you stop working to fix the problem. But yeah, definitely was an interesting experience when I went into my first commercial real estate room, a massive conference, CoreNet, lots of folks go. I walk into this room, and that's when you're just confronted with just how big of a diversity problem commercial real estate has. I had never been in a room so white, so male, and before, and yeah, it definitely was interesting. So I love the fact that you point out it's technology has a diversity problem and commercial real estate has a diversity problem. So that intersection is it's a pretty big challenge.
And why did you choose this route to go into real estate and technology? What was your sort of first role? Obviously, a bit of a shock. One of your first sort of conferences, but why did you think of that industry?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm a glutton for punishment. So, and I like complex challenges. So if you look at my career, I fought technology for years. When I was in consulting at Deloitte, I was very proudly part of the strategy practice. I did M&A work. I did joint venture advisory work, strategic cost reduction programs. And anytime anyone said, Adam, we need you on this client pitch or proposal for this technology engagement, I fought it tooth and nail. And the partners at Deloitte still tease me about it. Some of the partners that I work with, they're like, wait, you're a CIO now? Because for years I fought it. But the reason I ended up getting into technology wasn't because I was interested in technology per se. It was because I was interested in leadership. And at the time, and to some extent even today, there's such a lack of leadership within the technology space that there is an opportunity to fill a gap. And that's what I love to do. I love to try to fill gaps. There are great people who understood servers and networks and coding, but they were horrible with people management and leadership and development and talking to business leaders about technology. And that's the gap that I started to fill. And frankly, it's what's kept me interested for years. And when I started hearing about commercial real estate, a friend of mine who's an executive recruiter called me and said, hey, I'd love for you to talk to this small firm called DTZ. I said, what's that? And he said, commercial real estate. I said, I knew nothing about commercial real estate. But I saw logos and buildings that I had worked in and started listening to him and talking to DTZ and found what were their challenges. They needed leadership. They needed change agents. They needed to fix things. And I was like, oh, that sounds fun. And so I took the chance. And literally from the first conversation to me actually joining the company was only 45 days.
Oh my God.
It was really, really fast. And I came in and found that indeed they did have a leadership challenge. So it's been a lot of fun.
So what was, well, you're obviously a man that loves a challenge. What would you say when you sort of first joined DTZ, now Cushman & Wakefield, what would you say the biggest challenge there was, and how did you manage it, or I guess get sort of control over it?
Yeah, well, I think so first of all, the biggest challenge was very similar to my challenge at Aon, and so to some extent, I was almost I call myself kind of the father who gets a chance to raise his kids again, and learn from the mistakes the first time. And what was similar between the two companies is they'd grown by a series of acquisitions. And typically when you make a series of acquisitions, you have a choice to either do a massive integration right away, or what is very often the case, you just kind of make the cosmetic changes like the business cards, the logos, maybe the website, and then behind the scenes, you don't really do much other than that. And I think that's really what had been the case. So really, when I came in, I was presiding over 5 different organizations instead of one. And so the biggest challenge was to decide how quickly do you try to change that. And in my experience, it's akin to a bandage. It's just, it may hurt more, but if you make the change as rapidly as possible, you can actually long-term gain so much more than trying to do things over a slow period of time. So my first effort was, in essence, creating one global team, ripping all of these people from various organizations and putting them into one team so that they felt like they were one team. And so that was my starting point. How do I do that? How do I make all of these people feel like they are part of one big problem to solve instead of 5 small problems to solve?
Because that's bringing in plenty of different people from different sort of roles and all getting them to sort of share ideas and I guess ultimately, hopefully innovate. I mean, that's how we all progress, isn't it? How we all sort of communicate across sort of teams.
Absolutely.
After taking on that challenge, Adam, well, how long did it take you to do it? Like, these are challenges every business is facing, is bringing people together. So what's the secret sauce?
You know what? No. So first of all, there is absolutely no secret sauce. And, there are going to be people that work, with me now that are listening to this podcast, and they're going to remember the painful parts of the journey. But sometimes this is where Adam, the hokey guy, kind of comes in, because sometimes the thing that a lot of technology leaders miss and a lot of commercial real estate people miss is everyone has this desire to belong, and everyone talks about diversity, equity, and inclusion. The piece that everyone always forgets is this belonging, and ultimately, it's the sense of belonging that brings out the best people, the best in your folks. And sometimes creating that belonging is actually easier than fixing any of the other problems. So there's simple things that we did. We created an award that we called Go Red for culture. And it was red was our color. So we bought Cassidy Turley. Cassidy Turley was a green logo. We bought DTZ was a blue logo. We bought Cushman and Wakefield, and they had a red logo. DTZ in Europe in the company Zadelhoff was red. And so we jokingly referred to all of these colors kind of coming together. But we had collectively as a company decided this was our logo. Our logo was going to be this red logo that's all these companies coming together. And so we created this award called the Go Red Award. And it acknowledged people who intentionally went out of their way to connect with people from different legacy organizations to solve problems. And so it was, I know that DTZ did it this way, and Cassidy Turley did it this way, and Cushman and Wakefield did it another way. But this award was someone who said, I don't care about all of those legacies. We want to figure out the best way to do it for the new company. And that award was a coveted award. And we gave out Spirit Awards, and we gave money for these. And then at the end of the year, we'd have these videos where each team was encouraged to come up with a creative video depicting their year and what they accomplished that year. And we did all of these hokey things that are not typical technology type things, and certainly not commercial real estate things, to create kind of the sense of belonging. And that was really key.
These are like initiatives or ideas that people just wouldn't automatically think of, and these awards sound brilliant. Lots of businesses for obviously many years now, corporate startups, they're all looking at hiring diversity, but also making sure teams work collaboratively, they're unified. Well, when did you see businesses really start to take this seriously? Everyone talks about being on their agendas, whether people do a call to action and start actually making moves. What, Cushman and Wakefield has obviously been at the forefront of this. When did you start to see more headway being made?
Well, the easy answer is, the real answer, if I'm honest, is that hasn't happened yet. I think that what's happened now, and I think that this was brought forward in large part based on George Floyd's murder back in May, which was kind of this watershed event where you almost needed this unquestionably wrong act to occur in order for everyone to think about all of those grays that had occurred prior to. So it's a weird thing, because there's been equity imbalance, or there's been equity issues for years. There's pay differences between the genders. There's tremendous inequity when it comes to race, especially in the United States. Unemployment of African Americans twice that of white Americans. The wealth gap, the average Black family has something like $2,000 of wealth. The average white family has an average of around $140,000 of wealth. So there are all these really obvious things that have clearly existed for years, but it took literally a law enforcement officer kneeling for 8.5 minutes, 8 minutes, 46 seconds on someone's neck to really get people to think, wait a second, hold on, there is a massive problem. And I think that that's a good thing. And it's created all of these conversations that would not have happened before. The challenge is going to be turning that passion, that reaction to something that was so blatantly wrong, into measurable objectives going forward. And I think that's the only way we're actually going to see improvements. So right now, bravo to all of the companies, all of the CEOs out there who've made their statements. Bravo to everyone who's hired or changed their chief diversity officers. Bravo to everyone who's signed on to the CEO Equality Pledge. All of those things are fantastic symbolic gestures that really get the conversation going. The change is only going to occur when those same CEOs have equity and compensation targets tied to diversity and inclusion, because you only manage what you measure. And a statement is great, but the first time a CEO has his pay reduced or doesn't get a bonus because he hasn't moved the needle on gender equity, because he hasn't moved the needle on racial equity, that's when you'll really start seeing change occur. And that's why I'm hopeful more companies will do that. I'm hopeful that the institutional shareholder groups will start demanding that. And that's when you'll start to see the change.
Yeah, I think on a what I've seen globally is that these large institutions, agencies, lots of them didn't have the head of diversity in place. They've obviously started making moves to make these sort of hires. Obviously, not enough have them. They are putting all these structures in place. It takes forever to put all these structures in place. We wish it could happen sort of sooner. What about like I'm constantly working with HR teams who are, until they make these heads of their diversity hires, who are pushing for a more diverse talent pool. They find it extremely difficult. And from a person who hires people, I go to market. It's my job to provide a diverse candidate range for everyone. But I think it's also about attracting people and making real estate technology available from everyone. Do you think there's maybe a lack of accessibility from a younger age to this, or what can we do to get more diverse people from all backgrounds, races, genders into this space? Because there's a massive challenge there as well.
Yeah, there is, and I would answer the question with two phases. So the first one is, there's a fallacy out there that says it's impossible for me to find diverse talent, and so that's the first thing. So there are too many people that are currently in the workforce that are trying to find jobs to build their careers for me to accept anyone saying there is, the talent isn't there. So the first thing I would say to people listening would be, try harder. And I've talked with our head of talent and acquisition, and it's just, there's this philosophy within the Black community. We jokingly refer to it as 1 degree of separation, meaning if you mention the name of one person that who's a professional, degreed technologist, most likely I'll know that person as well, or I'll know one person removed. And so if you come to me and ask for a candidate for a role, it's highly likely that I'll be able to give you a diverse candidate for that role. If you ask some of your white male colleagues, they will be less likely to know the diverse candidates. It's just a fact of life and a fact of relationship. So the first thing I would say is definitely try harder to find those candidates, and don't assume just because the headhunter that you've always used can't find your diverse candidate that candidate doesn't exist. But the second thing I'd say is you're spot on. You absolutely have to start at a younger age. Yesterday, I watched a fantastic movie called Enola Holmes, and I guess I'd never even heard of it before. But it was a story of Sherlock Holmes.
It's on Netflix right now, isn't it? Yeah, I watched it with my parents last Sunday.
I loved the movie, and immediately wanted all of the little girls and little boys in my life to watch this movie, because it's just fascinating. It was the theory of starting at a young age to inspire this interest in science and technology and engineering and math. So yes, you have to start a lot younger. And so I applaud organizations like Inroads out there who intentionally try to get people in high school into internships from diverse populations. But you've got to look harder for the advanced career talent that's out there, and you have to work harder to start younger to find that talent, for sure.
Yeah. And then speaking of inspiration, everyone's always looking for senior management and leaders in their space who are obviously more experienced and in these sort of senior roles with, I guess, plenty of whether it's power, to sort of look up to and see sort of how they've grown. And in real estate and technology, a lot of them have very sort of similar profiles. And we need a lot of change, I guess, at the junior level and at the senior level. It's all parts of the tree. Now, I guess another thing I would love to sort of talk about as well for an employer or an employee listening in, what do they sort of need to do to evoke change and balance? Maybe whether obviously we spoke about inside, but what about outside of work?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question, and I think that there's one piece of advice that I always give to my I call them the straight white men, and first of all, I want to make absolutely sure that people realize no one is the enemy. If you're really trying to build an inclusive culture, there is no diversity means all of the above. So diversity includes all genders, all races, all sexual orientation. Like it includes everyone. So there is no bad guy. And so by default in diversity conversations, you start to refer to your straight white male friends. And they feel like they have a target on their back and they're the bad guys. And that's absolutely not the case. It is unfortunately the case that historically straight white men have gotten the leadership roles. And if you look at the Fortune 500, if you look at the FTSE 100, if you look at any index, the leadership tends to be straight white males. So the advice that I give to my friends that are in that bucket is not to feel bad about being in that bucket, but it's to look around every meeting that you enter or every event that you enter into and just see what the audience looks like. What does your circle look like? And if you walk into a company boardroom and everyone looks like you, just think about that for a second. But in your personal life, do the exact same thing. If you walk into your church, if you walk into your local grocery store, if you walk into a theater that you go to or a restaurant that you go to on a regular basis, just look around you and see if everyone there looks the same as you. And if you find that's the case in the majority of your life experiences, try to change your life experiences a bit so that you can experience different. You can experience, because that's really the beauty of life, is that you get these opportunities to learn from different people. And if you're not learning from different people in your personal life, then it's going to be even harder for you to learn from people in your professional life. So change it up a bit. Go to a different restaurant, try a different cuisine, go to a restaurant in a different neighborhood so that you can start to experience difference. And then you can bring those experiences into your work environment. And I think those little things will make such a huge difference because you'll have something else that you can talk about. You'll have another kind of factoid in your repertoire when you're talking to your colleagues. You can talk about the restaurant the Ethiopian restaurant that you went to over the weekend with your colleagues. Someone around you is going to be listening and they're going to think, oh, wow, he went to that place. Okay, I know that neighborhood. And they're going to feel more comfortable coming to you and talking to you about something else.
Yeah, I guess my first job, it was in real estate sales, and my business basically taught us to do that. And he said, you have to, every person you meet, you should be able to find at least 6 plus ones. And a plus one is something you have in common. And every person you meet, unless there's maybe something really difficult, that's what you should be able to have. And you should be able to share about 6 sort of different experiences and just communicate with people like we're all on this planet together. Now, Adam, I guess stepping away from this conversation, one of the bigger questions. So Huffington Post top social CIOs. This is you from going from restaurant to restaurant, town to town. How do you get that title?
Oh, I use that. It's just so funny to me because it's something that's since that came out, there have been several lists that come out, and even in commercial real estate now, there's a Duke Long list of the top 10 influencers within commercial real estate, and I was on his list, and all these other lists that have come out, and it's really, really funny. But it actually goes to the same thing that I was just talking about, which is how do you reach people where they are? And one of the things that I found when I came into commercial real estate is it was such an insular industry. And I would go into a room and with my peers, or I go to a theory tech event or something like that, and you get into these conversations and it's name dropping. It's everyone is name dropping. Everyone's like, oh, I've worked with Peter. Oh, you're talking about John. And because I wasn't part of the industry, I knew none of these people. And it was really a non-inclusive environment because you picture going into a meeting and half the meeting is talking about people you don't know. And so, what I did is I said, I have to find ways to really meet and connect. And what I found is that social media actually allowed me to meet people kind of outside the walls of the company and that I wouldn't have otherwise met. And so it's amazing. In my first 90 days at what was then BTZ, now Cushman & Wakefield, I met more brokers through Twitter and LinkedIn than I met through the company's kind of onboarding processes. And I was able to make connections with those brokers. And after I connected to them, it's like, hey, so just curious, what technology do you use in the company, and how do you use technology? And it was interesting because I could tell with some of them, that was the first time they're like, oh, wait, he works for Cushman. He's our CIO. And then they actually use that. They use that in conversations. And so they would, have their sales pitches, and they talk to startups that they're trying to do business with, or technology companies they're trying to do business with. And they're like, oh, well, actually, I'm actually friends with Adam Stanley, our CIO. I'll ask him that question. And so over time, it became kind of almost more of a joke that I knew so many people in commercial real estate within the first year of joining the industry, but it all came from Twitter and LinkedIn and all of these social things. And frankly, I think it's really important, and it's something that people from outside the industry, they're watching us. It's really, really important. And if you are able to have an outsized reputation in social media, it actually helps the company, because the folks that wouldn't otherwise consider going into a technology role in a commercial real estate firm, they're like, oh, but I see him out there. I see these people. They're very active, and it actually gives me opportunities to recruit that I wouldn't otherwise have. So even though it's kind of tongue in cheek that I even mentioned the most social, there's value in that, in a recruiter being able to say, hey, this is the person who would be your boss, and them, being able to look up and see, oh, I kind of see that he's out there. I see, who he talks to. And so it's a negative possible, because I have to be careful. That I'm not overly political.
Well, as long as you're not going on like Trump does, talking about China all over Twitter. Adam, I weirdly, whether or not you know this, I followed you on Twitter a long time before we started getting to know you. And you tweet a lot, but it's a way of engaging with people, isn't it? It's not, especially nowadays where we unfortunately can't get to these conferences or go to restaurants as well. So some beauty in that. Adam, I'm really conscious of your time here, but we're coming to the end of the podcast, and I'm sure lots of people would like to follow you on sort of Twitter here. You're obviously a thought leader in this space, but is there also any bit of passing advice you'd like to share with our audience as well? I think you speak on lots of these panels about sort of evoking change. What's is there any sort of call for action you want to leave us with, and then let us know the best way for people to connect with you?
Yes, absolutely. So first of all, thank you again so much, Lisa, for inviting me to the podcast and letting me be a part of your platform. I really appreciate that. That's an honor, and I never take that for granted. I think that what I would leave with all of the listeners, and this is whatever part of the population you represent, do more, however much you did this year, to get to know someone different, to reach out to someone different. Whatever you've done in the past, even if you think you've been stellar, do more next year. Look around the rooms that you enter and see who's there, and see who's not there, and do more to try to bring those folks that aren't there into the room with you. If you have the opportunity to explore different neighborhoods, different restaurants, that's great. But also invite someone into your neighborhood. Invite someone into the restaurant that you normally go to. So I think it's very easy for you to forget that for someone like me, my entire life, I have to be in a room that's different. But it's also valuable for you to kind of go and explore and bring people in. So do that. the second piece that I would say is don't be afraid to make a mistake or to say the wrong thing. The last thing that I want, and that I think that the last thing that we need, are tons of people walking around on eggshells, afraid that they're not going to be politically correct and afraid that they're going to offend. I would rather you come and say something to me that is completely offensive so that I can correct you than for you to just not come around me at all.
Mm.
And so I encourage you to have those conversations. That's that's how change is going to happen. And the last thing I would say is, if you have not put into your personal development objectives something relating to diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, change that. If you're not getting the pressure from above, if you're not getting the pressure from your HR, take it on yourself to establish something that you can measure yourself by to move the needle when it comes to diversity and inclusion. And I think that if enough people do that, then you'll start to see a groundswell of change, because it really does. You have to measure something to manage it.
Thank you so much for that, Adam. And what is the best way for our listeners to connect with you?
I am very active on Twitter, and so here's how I work. So if you're interested in, I write, I blog, and my blog is adamlstanley.com/connections. That's my blog. And if anyone is interested in some of my thinking and my rants on leadership and technology, that's the best way. And that's once a month or so. Twitter is probably my every day, probably 3 or 4 times a day. It will be a little bit more politics, leadership, society, culture, probably a broader range of topics. And then if you want the pure, what am I doing, and what do I think about the corporate world, LinkedIn is obviously the best way to connect with me there. So I would say follow me on Twitter, connect with me on LinkedIn, or if you have time, check out a few of my blogs on adamlstanley.com.
Awesome. Look, Adam, it's been a pleasure having you on the Propcast. I'm looking forward to catching up with you after the show.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us this week on the Propcast, and a big thanks to our special guests. Make sure you visit our website, www.nmre.co.uk, where you can subscribe to our show, or you'll find us on iTunes and Spotify, where all good content is found. Whilst you're at it, if you found value in the show, we'd appreciate if you could rate and review us on iTunes, or if you simply just spread the word. Be sure to tune in next Tuesday, and I'll catch you later.
Hi, this is Nelson from Property Quants. I'd like to invite you to join our Introduction to Data Science and Machine Learning for Real Estate seminar. To learn more, visit propertyquants.com/seminar and use special code LMRE20 on Eventbrite for a discount.
You're listening to a podcast company podcast. This was made by Podcast Syndicator, where we help you go from start to grow to making money with your podcast. Let us help you share your message and your voice with the world. Reach out now, Jason at podcastsyndicator.com or Brett at podcastsyndicator.com to find out more. Thank you for listening, and do come back to hear nothing but the best podcasts.